In this video, I'm going to use an Atmel ATtiny85 microcontroller unit. This is a programmable chip, and I'm going to program it through the standard Arduino IDE, and I'm going to do it two different ways. One is using the Sparkfun Tiny Programmer, and then the other one is just straight through the Arduino itself.
Okay, so this is the chip, and you can see it's an 8-pin chip, inline pin chip, and it's kind of hard to see this little dimple up here in this corner. So that indicates that's the top of the chip. So the pins are numbered from the left, going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, and pin 4 is the ground pin. Pin 8 is the VCC pin, and you can run this at 5 volts. Okay, so pin 5 is digital input pin, output pin 0. 6 is digital pin 2. Pin 7 is digital pin 3. Pin 1 is the reset pin. Pin 2 is digital pin 4. And pin 3 is digital pin 5. Also, those 4 of those digital pins can also be used as analog input as well. Okay, so, and this is the Sparkfun Tiny Programmer. Let's see if I can zoom out a little. Okay, so, and this chip fits on fits here, and then you can plug this into a USB port in your computer to program it. Okay, so this just kind of pops in here. Be careful because these pins will break. Okay, so that just kind of fits on there. It's kind of like that. And they also provide, it's kind of hard to see, these little headers. So you could actually hook your circuit up to this pin while it's while you're programming it for like debugging while it's plugged into the USB port. So these little headers, 8 of them, correspond to the 8 pins. Okay, so I've plugged the ATtiny85 into the programmer, and then plugged that into the USB port. And so this is the program I'm going to use to program it. And this is just going to be a little circuit that uses a motion sensor, a passive infrared motion sensor, and if it detects motion, it's going to bring the alert pin low, and the alert pin is connected to a little alarm. And so basically, if it detects motion here, the motion pin will go high off that PIR, and then it's going to bring the alert pin low. This alert pin is kind of odd because it sounds an alarm when it's low. Normally it's high, so if it doesn't detect motion, it's going to just keep it high, which means no sound. If it does, it's going to go low and then delay for a second. So I define the pins here. So that's the alert pin is going to be connected to the ATtiny digital pin 0, and the motion sensor PIR is going to be connected to digital pin 2. Okay, so if you haven't already set up your IDE for the ATtiny, first thing you want to do is go to this boards section and go to boards manager. Now this is for the newer IDEs. The older IDEs, you actually had to go download the files for the ATtiny version. I know IDE version 1.0 and some of those older ones, but if you have I think more greater than version 1.6, I think you do it this way. I have 1.68, which I think was just released last week. Okay, so I've already installed it, but you would see this section here. It wouldn't say installed yet. You'd click more info. Click more info. And I think there was only one version in it, and install. So mine's already installed, so I'm not going to do that, but that's what you would do. So that would install the files that will allow you to program
these boards or these processors. Okay, so then the next thing you want to do after you do that, you would select the board in ATtiny down here, and then processor, you would select which one you're using. I'm using 85. This may look a little different again depending on which version of IDE. If you're using the latest Arduino IDE of now, 168, and I think all the 1.6 versions do it like this, where you first select ATtiny, then ATtiny85. Some of the older ones, all the boards would be, all the ATtinys would be listed down here in this big menu, but they make it a little easier now. Select the port. So that's the USB port that I have the programmer plugged into. So this clock, the internal clock is 1 megahertz by default. You can up it to 8 megahertz, and notice these are internal. You can make it go faster with external crystal. If you're not using an external crystal, do not select one of these, because I think you'll break it if you try to upload it. So if you want to go to 8 megahertz internal, select 8. Then you have to actually burn it to the bootloader if you change that speed, that clock speed. And to do that, you want to make sure you select, if you're using this programmer that I'm using, USB device, you would USB Tiny ISP, and then you burn bootloader. So that's going to set it to 8 megahertz. Okay, so then you just upload the sketch like you normally do to Arduino. Hit that. Okay, so now it's uploaded the sketch to the ATtiny85. Okay, so I've removed the Tiny Programmer from the computer, and then removed the chip from it and put it in this breadboard. And this breadboard is being powered by this bench power supply at 5 volts. Okay, so then I hooked it up to this PIR alert circuit, and you can see pin 4 is going to ground, pin 8 is going to 5 volts. Digital pin 0, this little purple wire, is going to this little alarm. Okay, so that's the input pin, and the alarm is also powered by the breadboard. And then over there is the passive infrared motion sensor, and I have it facing away from me so I don't set it off, and it makes a lot of noise. So that input pin, goes into the ATtiny digital pin 2. Okay, so just to show that it works, I'm going to just take this piece of paper and put it in front of that motion sensor just to verify that it's going to set it off and that the circuit works. Okay, so that's how you would program this using the Arduino IDE if you had like a tiny programmer like this one. There's others that are similar to this, but you can also program it directly through on Arduino. Okay, so I'm going to show you that next. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is just hook up an Arduino Uno. Not hooked up to a circuit yet, so that's just plugged into the USB port. Okay, so then we're going to go to the IDE and upload the Arduino ISP sketch. Okay, so now what you want to do, I'm just going to do a new sketch, okay, and then I'm going to go back now, and I need to select the Uno, and then the serial port, which for this one is ACM1. Okay, so now I need to load up the Arduino ISP sketch. Let me make sure that's still, okay. Okay, so you have to load this into the Arduino first, okay, and then we're going to hook it up to the ATtiny, and then we're going to program the ATtiny. But to do that, you have to load the sketch. Okay, so I'm just going to upload that. Okay.
Okay, so now I've connected up the Arduino board to the ATtiny. I put the ATtiny on this little breadboard, and you can see physical pin 4 down here. It's connected to ground. Physical pin 8 is going to 5 volts, and the 5 volts is being supplied through the Arduino with 5 volts in the ground. So that's going to power the ATtiny while it's being programmed. Okay, so this programs it using the SPI serial protocol. Okay, so you're going to use the SPI ports on the Arduino Uno. Okay, so we'll start with port 13. Okay, so that's this green wire, and that's the SPI clock. Okay, and that's going to go to the ATtiny IO pin 2. Okay, which is the physical pin 7. Okay, and then the white wire, that's the master in, slave out. So that goes from Arduino pin 12 to the ATtiny IO pin 1, which is the physical pin 6. Okay, and then the blue wire is the master out, slave in, and that goes from the Arduino pin 11 to the IO pin 0, which is the physical pin 5 of the ATtiny. And then the yellow wire is the reset pin for the ATtiny. So recall, physical pin 1 is the reset pin, and that's going to go to the Arduino pin 10. Okay. Then the only other thing we have to do is we'll put this 10 microfarad capacitor, and that connects, kind of hard to see down there. Positive end is going to go to the reset pin, and then the negative end is going to go to the other ground. Okay, and the reason you need that, if you don't have that, the Arduino bootloader on the Arduino could run, and you don't want to do that while you're programming a chip.
Okay, so now I'm logged back into the computer, and I've got the PIR motion sensor sketch up. Okay, so now we're going to program the ATtiny through the Arduino board, and to do that, so now we want to go back and select ATtiny as the board, and make sure ATtiny85 is selected if that's what you're using. That's what I have. And then make sure the Arduino port is selected, and for me that's ACM1. And now for the programmer, you want to make sure and select Arduino as ISP. Let me double check all my settings. Okay, and then we just upload the sketch. Okay, so now we'll put this chip into the circuit we had previously and just verify that it works.
Okay, so this chip is the one I previously programmed using this board, and then the chip I have in there now is the one I just programmed with the Arduino. So it's just hooked up to the same circuit with that PIR over there and the alarm, running the same program as the first chip. And again, I'm just going to take this piece of paper and set off the alarm just to make sure the program did get uploaded. So these ATtiny chips are pretty cheap. You can get these for, I don't know, $2 or $3 each. Maybe if you buy kind of in bulk, maybe 10 and 25 at a time. So they're a lot less expensive than an Arduino board. So if you have like a simple circuit like this, especially if you want to make a permanent circuit, like if you really did want to set up a motion detector, you wouldn't have to buy kind of this kind of expensive Arduino, or even if you wanted to, you wouldn't have to buy that Atmel chip, which that 328 is more expensive than the ATtiny. So if you're already programming using Arduino and you're used to the IDE, they're really easy to program, and you can't do everything you can do with an Arduino, so you need to read up on that. There's not as many input-output pins, obviously. So, but for simple circuits like this, I mean, it's great. Thank you for watching the video.